have to look it up and report back to us. All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. For those of you who don't know, I'm Rachel, one of the event coordinators here, and I'm here to introduce you to our resident speaker, Kate Ranieri. In today's presentation, Kate will offer a glimpse into World War II correspondence between college alumni secretaries at Muhlenberg College and students who were active duty servicemen. The collection of over 1,000 letters, postcards, and photographs spent decades in an old filing cabinet in the storage area of the Office of Public Relations. In 2014, the office needed more storage space, so they decided to throw out these files. In a stroke of good luck, they glanced through the papers and gave their archivist a call asking, "Do you want these old letters?" This wasn't like Pearl Harbor as a day in infamy, but it was a day of rediscovering history. And after using these letters as teaching tools in her documentary research classes, Kate went on to build, with her collaborators, the Muhlenberg Memories Project, a digital site about the World War II experience at Muhlenberg College, along with other chapters. What you'll hear this afternoon is just a portion of the letters with all the candor and curiosity these men expressed in richly textured details from their evolution as young provincial college men to worldly military men and their love for Muhlenberg and country, accounts that few history books capture with such intimacy and passion. And shall we begin?
Before I begin, does anybody have a burning question after that introduction? I'll get it out of the way. I never was in World War II. I wasn't born yet, so I was in the military, but I was in the Air Force much later in the 70s. So that has nothing to do with anything, but just so in case anybody has curiosity about this. Okay, so I call them dispatches because they're letters, postcards that went from Muhlenberg out to men all across, I'm going to call the four corners of the world. I don't know why they say that, there are no corners, but anyway, you know, so these men were our men, Muhlenberg, Army, Navy, Army Air Corps, Marines, and they were enlisted and officers. So we had all of this. So I hope you'll find this one. I called it a labor of love because it really was. I mean, we had these two men, Wagner and Pfister, who were the secretaries that took care of these letters, but we had other people calling back, and there was a love of Muhlenberg that was really intense. When the war began, you could really get a sense also of the whole community of being very, very, I don't know what you would call it, you know, but they were committed to the war effort. Unlike what we see now with war efforts, it's a lot different back then. It was community helping out on campus, serving men. It was men saying, "I'm going to war." It's women going, "I'm out of the kitchen. I'm going to go do, you know, some other things in a factory." So things really changed, as you probably know. So we had a V12 program at Muhlenberg. That was the one thing that probably saved the college, because we had over 70% of our people, I say our people, but the students left. They went to war, and you can't keep a college alive. And so the president, Levering Tyson, had connections in New York and DC and managed to get the Navy, which they started this V12 program, and you think, why? We're landlocked. But we have actually used the Jewish Community Center, their pool, that gave us a body of water to practice. And what they needed from Muhlenberg was to teach men to be young officers as chaplains, and also young officers as medical officers. And so we had a really strong medical program at that time. So that was kind of the thrust of some of that. A lot of the men that we communicated with were not part of the V12. So you're going to get a mix, as I will show you. So these are some pictures of the men in the V12 marching across campus. Some of you, I don't know if you're familiar, but Muhlenberg is actually located in Allentown, Pennsylvania. It's been around since 1846. Don't quote me on that one. Huh? Oh, thank you. Lana is the expert in Muhlenberg. Details. Very good. Very good. Okay, have men lined up here. I'm just going to give you a taste of what it was like, because no longer did we have a dining hall, we had a chow hall. Men marched from classes to Chow Hall, to, they hung out their laundry on the trees. I mean, it was a really interesting time from what we can gather from their letters and also from some of our PR letters. So when you take a look at, I'm going to give you a few minutes just to take a look at what you're seeing on the screen right now. These are symbols, if you will, of letters, postcards, little corners of their stationery that were on different branches of the service. So you can see Signal Corps from the US Army. We also have Naval Air Station, Officers Club. So there are all kinds of different things. And they were quite proud of themselves in terms of the letterhead, you know, and in terms of the kind of stationery. But again, it was kind of, you know, paper was scarce back then. So some of these things are precious merchandise. All of these files that I'm showing you pictures of today are available for your review if you wish. You need to take an appointment with the archivist, Susan Falciani Maldonado. I've handled every single one of these letters and I have loved, you fall in love with them and you fall in love with some of these men, but you know, they're all gone. But it's those kind of things like, whoo, he's nice. So it's been a real labor of love for us as faculty and staff, you know, and also for people who are just interested in World War II. So here are some other letters. You see the kind of postage stamp, different ways of spreading the mail. If you see the one in the upper right-hand corner, this is V-mail. This is kind of the earlier, like a precursor to microfilming. They actually, because postage letters are heavy and they weigh down airplanes, they weigh down ships. And so they had to find a way to photograph on microfilm and then print it at the destination. This came out of Britain at the time. So we, you know, pretty early stuff. What else do I have here? So I'd like to just talk just for a moment about the value that I see of the correspondence. And for me, it seems that it deepens our knowledge of some of the shortages that happened in World War II. A lot of precious metals went toward the efforts of the war. We didn't get our stained glass windows finished in time, that sort of thing. All kinds of minerals and metals were short, you know, so this is a part, you know, and the college actually was really good about scrapping. We call it recycling, but then it was scrapping. So we had young men going out there, and a shout out to Paul Candelino. That was our first love. You know, he's long gone. But he was one of them that was so eager to scrap for the war effort that he went out and pulled railroad tracks. The problem was we didn't have permission to do it. So President Tyson had to kind of make nice with the people that actually owned the land. So, but he had a good, you know, good rally, if you will. It also helps us understand a lot about men's nicknames, and some of those nicknames to me strike me as funny, like Chucky, Tuss, Farmer, Mud Hen, Red Paco, Chippy. They called each other these nicknames all the time. We also had a lot of interesting popular expressions, like saying that something was swell. So as we're working with these letters with students, we have students who graduated from Muhlenberg and they're going like, isn't that swell still to this day, because it's kind of making fun of it, but we got into it, to say the least. There was also a thing about the emergence of public relations offices and alumni offices. They were not formalized yet. So we know about PR and its presence everywhere now, but that was not the case. And it ended up being that those two offices were the two directors that led this writing correspondence, if you will. It's also a nice way to connect to the descendants. We, for example, I'll mention James Hemstreet was a student in the Navy. He finished at Muhlenberg, he finished law school and became a judge here in Northampton County. So, you know, so we start reaching out to people, finding out who they were. We've even gone to people's homes and interviewed them, those that were still alive. And that was a real telltale thing. We'll talk a little bit more about it later. And then also reaching out to the community. We have taken these letters, the actual letters, we made a mistake and took them to middle schoolers. One letter just went, and they just fell apart, and they're like, and I said, they're very fragile. Some of them are like a real inexpensive paper, and so they did fall apart. We had to tell the kids, it's not your fault, but we never did that again. Never. All right, so some of the things about the value of this program too, as I see it anyway, is that we learn how these men interpreted their experiences of war. We also found out from the interviews and these letters about how the military was not that formal as it is today. There were programs that we have now that they didn't have protocols on safety. And so we had men backing into a propeller, didn't go well, those sort of things. And so we had different things that you really understand how far we've come, if you will. We also see a shift in the men. They were very provincial, bless their hearts. They were from this area, from some would be a little bit further to New Jersey or Connecticut, but they hadn't traveled. Their whole world was Hawthorne, New Jersey, or Patterson, New Jersey, or up in, here in Allentown. And when they got shipped out to places in the South, they were like, oh my God, I've never had fried chicken like this, or, those sort of things. And then, of course, when they were in foreign countries, everything was odd to them and glamorous and not. We have one gentleman who told us as a 17-year-old spending time in a Paris dance hall, spending the night, and he tried really hard to behave himself, not say what happened, but so it's kind of interesting, in a way. It also illustrates men's grammar. They had perfect grammar. Writing was so impressive and also handsome, and some of beautiful handwriting. Another thing about cursive, those of you who know how many of you know how to read cursive? Yeah, it seems like so silly, right? A lot of our students don't know a thing about reading cursive. If you gave them a letter, they'd be like, I can't read this. And now they don't read cursive. They've not taught it. And so we have a lot of archives now that are not going to be accessible except for people who, you all are experts at it. So see how valuable you are. You just didn't know that today. But it's really amazing that they don't read that. And I'm like, and some of the writing was really awful too, which, you'd sit there and look at it a million ways to try and figure out what they were saying. Also, we had ideas about what they were like, in the sense of what they felt like about food and alcohol. A lot of competition about alcohol, I might add, and also about ethnic and racial norms. One story of a man that just popped into my head just now was he talked about dancing with Japanese women. And, he said, they don't know our dances, but we taught them, and it was nothing racy or anything like that. But when we actually interviewed him in North Carolina, he said, I never danced with these women. And I'm like, you can tell me your wife is gone. He stuck to it. I didn't say anything else about it, but he had no memory of that. And I'm like, always made me sort of curious, what you remember. Memory's a funny thing. But we also, along the way, discovered shortages in some of these letters where paper particularly was difficult for men to write. And so when Muhlenberg started this program, they also started paper, sending them stationery packages, paper envelopes, which helped them out as well. So the correspondence was started with John Wagner. He was sent to war. Gordon Pfister, the public relations, and was also part of his job was at the Morning Call, took over, and there he is with his secretary. All the secretaries at that time were women. Is that a big surprise? Probably not. Anyway, yeah, kind of like, really? So some of the things that they sent were, if you'll see here on the left-hand side, victory flashes. And what they were, victory to them, usually they'd have a byline that would be one day closer to victory, and that sort of thing. But they made their own stationery, their own designs and that sort of thing, and typed out letters that kind of gave an overview of what they've heard from the front. The paper on the left-hand side is actually carbon paper. I don't know whether it was pink originally, but mind you, these were in storage for decades. So some of that heat can affect things, just even like mimeograph paper can be affected by heat. But what they would do is type letters, carbon copy, they'd send the original to the man to whoever, and then they would send or keep these carbons. So which is really unusual. We have one of the most unusual collections. There were not a lot of these programs during World War II, but we have this, and we have, all these back and forth, which is kind of interesting. This is what the mailbox looked like when they packed it up. And you can imagine how heavy that was. And so the microphone precursor to it, the V-mail really helped. So obviously this is a photo opportunity for them. This is our chow hall, as they call it. It was Wilson Hall at the time. What you see is a lot of community women who came in and helped with the V12 program, serving. The one young man that you can see, I don't think I have, do I have a pointer? Maybe. Anyway, he's the one that's kind of most forward. You can see his face almost in there. Name is Fritz. Pardon me. Oh, I thought somebody said something. He was one of the men that we actually interviewed. So he has all these lovely stories about falling asleep during the time that he was supposed to be on alert, so to speak, and how he got in trouble, but that's another story. Food is a big thing with men, and they write about it a lot. I mean, food is critical. It's also, integral to life, but food, here's a letter here from James Hemstreet who says, food situation is excellent here. We're eating steak and ham and butter. We even get ice cream every third day. That was a big deal, having ice cream, as you can imagine. Many, if not most, of the students were accustomed to eating Pennsylvania Dutch cooking, which for those of you who don't know, includes a lot of starchy food. I mean, a lot of potatoes, lima beans, corn, that sort of stuff. And they missed it terribly. So along comes this young man named Mervyn Schumann in his letter that he wants to be shared all across the globe. Our cook on his ship from Hazleton, Pennsylvania, is a really good old boy and knows Dutch cooking and baking. And so you're more than welcome to come aboard. You just have to find the ship, right? Also, here's another letter. This is a letter from John Kern, who now he's writing from an officers club. You'll notice at the top, the stationery. This is another one of those things. Also to pay attention to is the underlining. They didn't come underlined. This is Pfister underlining to tell his secretary, put this in the V flashes. So, this is really unpacking what we have there. So I want to read this to you because I think it's really a humorous piece of it. There's a lot of rivalry in this letter because he's a rival with Wilmer Cressman, who is a very well-known student. He was a big shot on campus, big man on campus, very accomplished, also became a full, a Navy man after the military, stayed as a lifer, if you will. So the letter goes, I don't believe that Wilmer Cressman, the top kick of the 42 Weekly, visits the nightclubs, the right clubs in England. This business of no scotch and warm beer is vicious Nazi propaganda. Here we have scotch enough and ice enough to outlast a dozen Hitlers and about a gross of Mussolini's. Where is this club? That, gentleman, is a military secret. And this kind of stuff goes on and on. Another one from Hemstreet that says, in case you think we're starving, we're eating steak and ham with plenty of butter and an abundant supply of apples, oranges, potatoes, carrots, and etc., and plenty of canned goods. And then in another letter, and some of these letters, I'm not publishing them in because we don't have permission from their family because we had trouble. It was very hard tracking down families because some of them weren't from this area. And believe me, Susan Falciani, the archivist, has every means available. She's also married to a private investigator. So we've dug. Great. I mean, sometimes we would be at different computers at the same time trying to figure out who could find this out fast enough, but anyway, this is from John Moore. He's a class of 45 and he's writing in November 1944. And he says, seeing as how I've just finished a darn good Thanksgiving dinner of turkey, ham, and all the essentials, including ice cream, pumpkin pie, and fruitcake for dessert, I guess it might not be a bad idea to let you hear from me. So food first, then I'll talk to you, sort of thing. We also heard about culture. Now, these men had a sense of humor too, even though there was a war going on, and you can pick up on some of that. So here is Henry Becker writing. He's writing obviously from, pardon me, from India, and he says, This business of war is not a series of glamorous adventures. Let me tell you, they really were disillusioned because the movies, the silver screen projected military life, just like they do medical life and all one way. So glamorous, you know, and everything that's problematic is resolved in an hour or 2 hours or that sort of thing. So this war is not a series of glamorous adventures as the movies paint them to be. It's a darn tough job. The first week or so spent sleeping on the ground. Anyone who has been in India a week or more certainly realizes that America is worth fighting for. You know, so here, so this letter is very hard to read. The green ink is a pain, but I wanted to point this out because there's a little white block there. What do you think that is? Yep, censorship. Absolutely, you pass. You get an A. Very good. Pardon me? Hoorah! Yes, you did. And you're going to be featured in one of my stories here soon. So, yeah. All right. So, also in culture, we have two men who are traveling on the Riviera, south of France, and he's writing about this trip. Now, mind you, he's been in a ship for a really long time, and you get cooped up. This is not, I don't know that much about a ship, but I have been in a Navy ship as a tourist, and it's crowded. If you've got claustrophobia, it's bad, you know. But anyway, he's marveling at the Riviera of southern France, saying it's like seventh heaven. And he's talking about staying in a swank hotel and the joy of taking a bath in a tub, turning on a faucet and water running out. I mean, this is the most sublime feelings when you've been on a ship for a long time, and pushing a button and the toilet flushes. Can't get much better. This is Him Street, the judge, as a matter of fact, writing. The stationery was sent to all the Muhlenberg men, and boy, did they love hearing about it. You'll notice, I'm just going to stop for a moment. This is an example, I think, of nice handwriting on the left-hand side. It's beautiful. Also at the top is the stamp. It's like a rubber stamp stationery. That's what the stationery looked like from the Muhlenberg men. It says "for God and country." This was Peter Gabriel Muhlenberg, who was a chaplain and then became a soldier. And so he whipped off his, you know, chaplain robes and put on his army thing. And so he's been glorified. It's actually a statue that's on the campus. Lana goes, yes. So yes. Anyhow, I just thought I'd point those things out because they really appreciated the gift. They loved hearing about other men, about the athletic powerhouse that Muhlenberg had thanks to the V-12. The V-12 brought men from all over the United States, big men, hefty men, strong men, athletic men, and it made the athletics a lot more powerful. And they did really well in a lot of their competitions, which I'm not a sports aficionado, but I did know that. Anyway, many of them shared the sentiment that no other college did what Muhlenberg did. They were very concerned about being forgotten, and they comment on that. You know, they don't forget the fighting alumni. And a lot of them describe the paper packets that they received as nifty, you know, that sort of thing. So you get a real sense of some of their stuff. Here's another one from Walter Feller, December 43. He begins his letter expressing how the Christmas package of stationery was the most useful gift he received, and ended with, "Keep writing your letters about Berg and Bergman and the armed forces. It's swell to hear about the college and how it's getting along in athletics and other things. And your letters are about the only way I can keep track of what's happening to a lot of my friends and former classmates. So keep on writing your scuttlebutt." Another one. Yeah. Another one that's not up here on the screen, but is a letter from a man who is not only appreciating the letters, but he's also appreciating his former faculty members, and he calls them out by name. "The way in which you managed to strike a consistently cheery, newsy note week after week has won my sincere appreciation." And again, writing about his appreciation for faculty, he writes, "I appreciate it if you would convey my very best to Dr. Corbiere, Dr. Stang, and Dr. Shankweiler. The infinite patience with which they hammered facts into my thick skull entitles them to the martyr's crown in some remote pedagogical heaven. Yes, they can be sort of fancy in their language. Some of the things that they also sent, they would send postcards, they'd send photographs of themselves when they traveled around and had time off. And of course, they sent holiday greetings. More. In these, they of course would share all their experiences as well. They also shared a lot about recreation. And I'm just going to give you one example just because it struck me as funny. I'm stationed in New Guinea, a tropical paradise where fun is stacking fallen coconuts into neat piles over and over. They also talked about being bored, about playing golf in country clubs, about, having time to see all the movie stars in California when they were stationed there. So they did have some downtime. Keep in mind that there was no program that, well, you're going to call a war, here's how you do it. They were figuring it, they meaning the military, were figuring out what they were doing as they were doing it. So they'd send one person to Northwestern in Illinois and they go, no, I want you over here, move them around. So they moved around a lot. They also got promoted a lot too, especially if you were out in the front. And they also talked about travel. I thought this was kind of funny because talking about being on this tin can ship, was not made out of tin, but seeing no scenery except atolls covered with palm trees and very few women. This particular letter goes on to talk about the color of the women and they weren't attractive. It's really, so some of the language they use is not acceptable nowadays. And most of the time I just kind of like, leave it off. You can see it for yourself though, it's all available. We also have someone by the name of Jim Freeman writing in September of 1945 about 40 days being on a ship, 17,000-mile journey from France to Panama to the Philippines, and thanking everyone for doing a good job. Those letters are the best thing any college has done for its alumni during this war. Speaking of war, they didn't often call it war. They called it this mess, this thing, so they just talked around it. Sometimes they did, and they talked very directly about everything that happened, but I've read you the one on Harry Becker already, but the men also sometimes would call it this chaos. One of them I love that said, you could bet your bottom dollar that I, for one, am looking forward to today this mess is over so I can get back and finish up at Berg. Another man who is a Navy chaplain said, we're hoping and praying for an early settlement of this mess. This is Arnold Sloan. We're hoping for a peace arrangement that is worthy of the high standards of our country. You hear some of these words, you can get this sense that they feel they're honorable. I mean, you get that sense of patriotism in a lot of the word choices they use. Okay. One more. There we go. Now, this is going to get a little gruesome here, but I'm talking about paratroopers. The people that put on parachutes and jump out for different reasons. So this is John Brown in France, July 1944. He's writing, when I wrote my last letter, it was safe and sound in England. However, just a few days later, I found myself on a plane bound for France. From there, it was by truck up to the front lines. In fact, on the second day, with an outpost patrol, we were so close to the Germans, we were caught in our own artillery barrage. I ducked in a house on the edge of a village. The second house away was really blasted and went up in flames. The shells evidently hit a hidden cognac supply, and the bottles were popping and exploding like a regular arsenal. Needless to say, I got the hell out of there as soon as the artillery was lifted. So things that they discover. There was also one of them that shared another blast similar to this, and he happened to be in a trench, in a foxhole, and wrote, "Foxholes are good." There's another paratrooper by the name of Jack Blair that was writing in 43, talked about how much he and his pals appreciated all the news from Muhlenberg, But then, hang on, this is gonna get kind of icky. He wanted everyone to know what they had to go through to train to be a paratrooper. And he said, we're tough. And they also thought we were the best of the best, if you will. We crawl through animal entrails, accustom ourselves to the smell and nausea of rotting bodies. We march through treacherous swamps, deserts, jungles, over mountains. Wielding knives and bayonets are our specialty. So he just wanted you to get a sense for this. All right, here's another one. This is from a guy by the name of Charlie Deal. He's telling the Secretary Gordon Pfister, this army is no bed of roses, but there's a war to be won and it can't be won with roses. You know, it's just like, well, no, that's true. Then he started talking about the SS Muhlenberg. It was being launched. And so we have a christening of the SS Muhlenberg. A lot of SS ships, whatever, were named after colleges at the time. So in the far right-hand, the right-hand picture, there's a picture of Levering Tyson, who was our president at the time, posing at the helm. His wife was the one that christened the ship. We have footage of him standing by her. She's standing with a big corsage. Remember those big corsages that people wear, like half their garden on the side? So she's got this bottle of champagne and she goes to whack it and nothing happens. And now this is no sound in the film. You see this footage and you see him going like that. You know, I would love to get somebody who can read language, read lips, because I think she'd probably tell him to, you know, I know how to do this, Buster. But anyway, she christened Reba, Tyson christened the ship, and on they went. But Tyson was not just keeping his eye on the war effort. He was also thinking about, what are we going to do after the war? We need to think about, you know, bringing in more students and that sort of stuff. And so he started talking about going co-ed. And the men did not like that. Yes, and they not only the men, but also some of our faculty, and some faculty wrote big booklets of stuff. They were so upset about it. So I can't see any need for it myself. The better schools aren't co-ed, and Berg is one of the better ones. This is one of the men that we interviewed in North Carolina, you know, so another one. Dear Gordon, I want you to place me on the record as being opposed to this. I believe my father is also. The crisis is what has brought on this menace. You see, in other words, we're not talking about this war, we call it a menace. There's a little bit more than a menace, you know, but I'm sure the church could find some much better solution to her need for a woman's college. You know, it's like, get along. And then we have Paul Nichols saying, was quite pleasantly surprised. There we go. To read the Berg is going co-ed and know that it will add much to the success and popularity with our college has always enjoyed. I'm sure the co-eds will provide a real draw for the boys. I'm like, and it's funny too, when the students read stuff like this, they just get really ticked on the girls, the females. When we tell them also that once we did admit women to the college, that they were required to serve men first. Man, it's like a revolution in class, and you're like, there, that was back then. So anyway, that was really interesting. Another one that I'm trying to think who, I can't remember who it was. This, as with a few more of the Bergmen I met, I read regretfully the fact that Muhlenberg is becoming co-ed. It sounds better for the pocketbook, but from here, it looks as though Berg, most of us knew, is gone forever, you know, kind of thing. What we find though is like, it was about 10, 12 years later when co-eds first came to school in 1957, and we have one of those first brave women right over here, right? Yeah, there, yeah. Here's a few, you know, and that is an entirely different story that I would love to bring here, because what happened to women here was really, it's not different than in other schools, but it definitely, they were treated differently. Now, not everyone felt that way. Some women felt like, it's no big deal. they were used to having brothers harass them and sort of thing, but a lot of them really could tell the difference. And of course, now things that flip where there's more females at Muhlenberg than there are males, but that's pretty nationwide. So that's kind of what I wanted to tell. And I have other things that I can talk to you about, answer questions. But if you want to know more, there is a Muhlenberg Memories project that I did with the archivist, Susan Falciani Maldonado, and Tony Dalton. The three of us are the co-collaborators of this site. We have things about World War II, about the interviews that we've done, about the correspondence. I mean, a lot more detail. And of course, a lot of the files that I've pulled from are available as well for you to look at. I mean, all this is, in the public domain, if you will, but questions so far? Yes.
Most of the letters, well, I noticed that most of the letters that you have projected were from very late in the war. And they sound like they were kind of having a party, as opposed to letters coming from earlier in the year, or in the war. Did you have those too?
That many.
Oh.
Yeah, some of them were from 41, but 43 for sure. But no, the program started pretty much after Pearl Harbor. That's, when we started. So you aren't going to get all the new first few. And it was really, if you think about it, it was a real scramble to keep Muhlenberg afloat. And then we had the V-12 program come in. When you had the V-12 is not just a V-12, it's a Navy program. The president was no longer in command.
Would you explain what that is, V-12? What does that mean? You don't know? Sorry.
No, it was a military preparation program for officers. Jim, I'll let you answer it. Yep. Here we go, Jim.
It was a program to accelerate a college education so they can get officers who are dentists, medical doctors, the chaplains, and line officers.
All that, right?
When they finished that.
Yes.
They had a degree and they went to another school to get a commission.
They came out with a degree and then they were enlisted for a period of time while they went through their training, and then they became an ensign or a second lieutenant, depending on the branch of service that they were at. Yeah. Other questions that maybe I can or cannot answer? Yes.
I was wondering if you had any comments in the letters about estrangement from home or looking for people coming through the various Army camps to entertain and so forth. I know a man who was in the Pacific Theater in World War II, and he said he walked 5 miles to see Bob Hope.
We have some letters of people being entertained by different troops, but that didn't all happen early on, but yes, there were a lot of entertainers for sure, but not that many letters that talked about it. They did talk, here's one letter that they did talk about how the British respected their royalty, and admire them. But he said, it's kind of like the way that we are fans of our celebrities, but we don't have the same respect, so they could see that distinction. Little side track.
Nobody mentioned Kilroy. Kilroy was everywhere.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah, the little sign, Kilroy was here. Yeah. Other questions?
Some of us are of a certain age, and I can certainly remember being here in the 40s and old enough to know what was going on. I remember when Roosevelt died suddenly and the blackouts in Bethlehem. And I remember being in the home ec class in junior high school, and all we could buy is gray cloth because all the stuff was going into the war effort. It was a very different time.
Absolutely. And I appreciate your sharing that, because there were a lot of places in the Lehigh Valley that were like Bethlehem Steel and like Mack Trucks and other silk manufacturers that were manufacturing clothes, but ended up making parachutes and military uniforms. And that was all up and down, up in the Poconos and down. So that was another thing, but it was different. There weren't that much to work with. Let's put it that way. You're right. Yes, Carolyn.
Kate, I was also, first of all, this is an absolute delight. Thank you very much. Do you have any paired correspondence that is recipient, the person who receives and the person who sends? So
Exactly.
back
It's
and
a good
forth.
question. A lot of them, there were obvious favorites, if you will, because some men wrote a lot more and a lot more descriptive. So James Hemstreet was one, Wilmer Cressman. We have lots and lots of their letters. I just was trying to be mindful of the time, not to keep you here for, yammering on and on and on, but yes. Yes, Gordon writing to Jim Hemstreet writing him back. Is that what you're asking? Those are private, we don't have any of those private pieces. This is just college. And once in a while, a fiance or a sister or a mother, father, whatever would write about someone missing in action, which was, get this, there's this one man, I've read all his letters and then I read a letter from the fiance and say he's missing in action. And then they said he's a prisoner of war. And the whole time I'm just like, weeping almost because it's really sad. And then I mean, wait a minute, he became a lawyer. What am I crying about? It's just because you get into this, it's like it just gets so, focused on it. But yes, but the personal stuff, no, it's been really fun. But yeah, one section of the Muhlenberg Memories site is dedicated to Paul Candelina, who was literally named Mr. Muhlenberg. He was a chemistry, major. He married a chemistry major from Cedar Crest. They married in the chapel. It was Camelot all over again. He was handsome as all get out. Susan, the archivist, and I just, oh, he's so cute. She has a picture of their wedding thing in her office. I mean, it was just, so we ended up following through all of his, but he never wrote any letters. He wrote letters to Robertson. There's a Robertson Hall on campus. And yes, she left $15 million. Yes. We visited her down in Winter Park. We visited some of his friends. We found the son. Now, mind you, what happened was Paul Candelino was serving in Asbury Park in the Navy and he wanted to be on a ship. I mean, it was just all, and so he got his orders to go. He was trained in San Diego, took a ship from San Francisco over to Hawaii, got on the USS Indianapolis, and they left Hawaii and went to Tinian. I always get that wrong. Because they were unloading fusionable material for the bomb. And as they left unescorted, which was a big no-no. No one knows why. It was a whole big predicament. They got bombed and he died. And shortly after that, the wife realized that she was pregnant after visiting him in San Diego. It was just like, so she's about 2 months pregnant. The president of the college was really, well, all of us were really hard. I wasn't there, but I'm not talking about. In the reading them, I get all place myself again, but Tyson actually said, when your son grows up, he will get a free ride here at Muhlenberg because they, felt so moved by this sort of thing because he was just such an honorable young man. He did a lot for example, there was explosion at a chemical plant in New Jersey, and it was like a day before this young man was to go back to Muhlenberg. Paul went with the wife of one of our administrative types and represented them. He was the one that took the railroad tracks too, because he's gung ho, don't stand still. I'll take it and scrap for the war effort. But yeah, we also went to Hawthorne, New Jersey, where he's from. They named a street after him. His son came from California, who I was thinking he's gonna look just like, oh, he looked like his mother instead. I was so disappointed, but just terrible. But we had a really interesting time though. We dedicated it. The people from Muhlenberg that are in Hawthorne are still there. So it was the whole thing. The state troopers were there, the mayor was there and all that kind of stuff. So it's like, just for this little pocket of people, but anyway. We could go on. If Susan was here, we would talk your ear off for the next 3 hours and you'd walk out going, oh my God. But we really got into this, and I got into it with the students too, because I taught students how to handle primary research. These are primary sources and how to do, archival work in them. And they told stories about them, made little like short documentaries about them. And that led for some people a different trajectory of their life. Not a lot, just a few, but they just really enjoyed the projects. Other questions? MuhlenbergMemoriesProject.com. Take a look at it. I'm happy to drag out more files if you want. They're on a hard drive. And so, yes, I can yuck it up all day long. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Kate.
Hmm. Hmm.
Oh, sorry. Normally I'm the one getting startled. I just needed to.
Hmm. Hmm. Huh?